scary to be here today, talking to an audience that I have so much in common. Most of the time when I'm coaching internationals, the first question that comes up is the weather and the climate, and I know that this is not really an issue for someone coming from an equally miserable place. So the sort of first part of the culture shock you may experience here, this is not something that you sort of have to deal with. But I think there's an interesting part about moving from a country to another when it's such a small distance, both geographically and culturally. And I think that is that when we come to that new country that is very close to our own, we're expecting that country to be very similar. And when we're expecting things to be different, sometimes it's much easier to deal with those differences because they're so obvious and you're sort of prepared for them. But if you come into a country and not expecting any differences, you might not notice them, or you might think that they depend on your personal qualities or your personal behavior. And it might also be difficult to understand that these differences exist. There are different ways of mapping countries and cultures, and I'm sure many of you have seen this map or diagram already. It's called the World Cultural Map or the World Value Survey, and this is made by two social anthropologists, and they are trying to map national cultures according to two axes. So you have the x-axis here, and to the left you have what's called survival values, and to the right you have self-expression values. And where countries are plotted on this axis is very much according to sort of socio-economic status. If you're thinking about a career choice, for example, if you're in a country to the left, you might choose a career according to employability or the financial possibilities that would come with that career choice. Whereas if you're located in a culture to the right, you're more likely to choose a career according to your personal interests or something that you will think will make you sort of develop your hobbies or interests or passions even. And then we have the y-axis. At the bottom you have sort of traditional, often religious cultures, and at the top you have secularized or what's called rational cultures. And this is very often related to the way we see authority, how we relate to authority, and how we see sort of family values and things like this. If you go up, for example, you would have people who are more positive to divorce, abortion, and such things, whereas if you go to the bottom, you will have a more sort of skeptical attitude to that. And what is interesting about this map, I think, from my perspective, is that we have Sweden at the very top right. So Sweden is actually one of the most extreme countries in the world. We're very much to the right on the x-axis, having very high expression values, and we're also fairly high on the y-axis, meaning that we don't really care about family traditions or authority. And because we have a sort of a Baltic theme here today, I've also plotted where you can find your cultures. What's a little bit interesting here is that Estonia that has actually sort of left its Protestant neighbors and moved into the part of sort of Catholic Europe. And obviously, this map is not telling everything. It's not necessarily the truth. But I think what is quite interesting is that your countries here are located on the sort of the middle of the x-axis, fairly much the same point on the y-axis, but there is a bit of a distance here when it comes to those self-expression values and that idea that you should take life decisions according to your personal interests, your personal hobbies, etc. Whereas I think, or according to the map, many people in your cultures will have a much more sort of rational approach, you could say, when choosing what to do with your life. You're more interested in financial stability and employability, etc. And I think this is, when I'm meeting my clients and talking about this is something that often is sort of a central point or central focus in the way we can understand how Swedes function and how Swedes see themselves as part of the group and in a professional context. And I like to couple this with a really good book and a really boring book. It's about 600 or 700 pages long, and it's a sort of mapping out the history of Swedish social policy in the last 500 years. The title är Svensken människa, are Swedish human beings, is sort of insinuating that Swedish people can be quite cold, reserved, and not really showing any emotions together with other people. But however boring and heavy this book, it proposes a really interesting theory about how Swedish society is built and how each individual in this society is encouraged to be themselves and follow their own path instead of being part of a bigger community. And the two authors here, they are two historians, they call Henrik Berggren and Lars Trädgård. They propose a theory. There has been a film made with this title, The Swedish Theory of Love, that some of you may have seen. It's quite old now, it's possibly even 10 years old. It is sort of taking this theory to its extreme. It's made by a Swedish-Italian director, and he's proposing with that Swedish people are very lonely and suffering. But originally in this book, and the way it's been formulated by this author, is actually quite a positive view on Swedish sort of individual independence. And to show an example of how this works in practice, we could look on the topic of student funding. I've tried, with the help of a great website called google.com, to find out how student funding works in Estonia and Lithuania. I know 70%, but probably not everything. But the way this works, if you have a young person going to university, money needs to come from somewhere, and different countries have dealt with this question in different ways. So if you have the United States, for example, you have a very strong focus on the individual. The state, however, is seen as some sort of threat. It's an organ that is interfering with the independence of the individuals. You don't have any sort of public student funding. Either your family will pay for your studies, or if you're an exceptional individual, you will get some sort of scholarship. And that means in the United States you have two very important organs here. It's the family and the individual. These are the sort of most important units within society. If you would look at the European welfare state, in continental Europe, it's quite different. As an individual going into university, if you don't have the funding on your own, you can apply for a student loan or a student grant from the state. The state is there to help those who don't have the financial means to go into higher education. But those financial means will be dependent on how much family income you have. Does your family have money? Does your family have an income? In that case, you might not be entitled to a student loan, because in first hand, your parents are supposed to pay for your education. So in that sort of classic welfare state of Europe, you have the two main units are the family and the state. The state is helping the family. And I know when I meet people coming to Sweden, they are assuming this is the way how it works too, but it's not. Because in Sweden, if you're going into higher education, you are entitled to a state-funded student loan and a student grant, but it doesn't matter at all how much money your parents or your family have. you are seen as an individual already from that very beginning, and you're supposed to be financially independent, meaning that you are not in any way dependent on your family when you're taking that life choice of yours. And I mean, you can take a classic example. We'll have a young woman, she wants to become an actress, but her family believes, she should go into medicine and become a doctor. And if you have that traditional system of asking your parents to fund your study, there will be some sort of conflict or compromise there. Either this young woman will have to go into medicine against her own will, or she will go into acting and her parents will have to pay for something they think is not a very sensible decision. If you're sort of new to Swedish culture, you will think that the Swedish system will create conflicts because that young woman is, she can do whatever she wants because she's not dependent on her family to take this life decision. But from that sort of Swedish mindset, what we're doing here, we're trying to avoid that conflict. You will never have to go to your parents and say, I want to do something that is against your will, or you have to pay for something that you don't believe is a good thing for me. So we have a system separating that individual from their family, enabled by the state, enabled by society, in order to protect the relationship in the family. We believe that by separating those things, there will be fewer conflicts, and we will actually love each other more. We will have better relationships because they are not contaminated by, say, the life choices or each individual.
I have a question.
Yes?
Is that the same for taking care of old parents, that the state would take care of your elderly rather than the family, and so that also to avoid this?
Yes, I mean the system here is very much that when you're coming to that age that you will need help in your everyday life, most individuals will choose to have a solution where they move into a home or where they have someone from the state coming to their house and helping them. And you might believe this is a very sort of cold attitude, and it is because that their children are not happy to help their parents or don't love their parents, but it's often the choice of the elderly person not to mix up their relationship with their children by making them their carer. They will want to keep those things separately, to feel independent on a practical level, so that they can have a very sort of strong emotional relationship with their children. So definitely related, and this applies to many situations. I'm sure you've seen this if you've been out for a drink or for a meal or a coffee with a friend or a colleague or someone, and those Swedish people will insist to pay for their share, down to the very last, we split that dessert in 3 pieces and I ate more than you. Now let's calculate this. It's not a coincidence that this app Swish was invented in Sweden. And again, you might get this impression that Swedish people are stingy, because in a more civilized society, you would just pay for each other's coffee, and in the end, that would balance itself out because next time you will pay. But our sort of internal logic here, so if Neda and I would go for a coffee, for example, and she pays for it, I would be very happy. But then she wants to meet me again. I'm thinking maybe she wants to meet me so that I can pay for her coffee, so we're even. And that makes me feel really insecure about our relationship. Like, is she meeting me because she wants her coffee back, or is she meeting me because she loves me? And as a Swedish person, I want to ensure that our relationship is based on pure love, not, coffee or paying for drinks. And that is why I will insist on paying for my own coffee, and Neda will pay for hers. And then we can meet many times and feel perfectly happy about our relationship. And that means that in our lives, we're drawing a very sort of sharp distinction between our finances, this is dirty stuff, it can go wrong, and our emotional relationships, our friends, our family, people we love. And I think a very common misunderstanding if you see Swedish people on the surface is that we're trying to protect our finances, that we are stingy. But it's probably more the other way around. We're trying to protect our relationships or our emotions by not involving them with money and other sort of dirty things. And I would go so far to say that this is actually not just finances we're talking about, but all sorts of practical things. Some of you may recognize this. This is from my building. I live in a building built in 1949. So this is an old-fashioned system for booking our communal laundry room. If you can locate number 22, you know what time and what date I have booked mine. But the system is pretty clear. You have the dates at the top, and then you have the time slots. And then basically when you want to wash your clothes, you take your little key, you take out that little lock and put it in the right position. That means you have reserved a time slot and a date to wash your clothes, and your neighbors are not allowed to use the washing room. And again, you know, this is showing that I live in this building with another 100 people, and I don't need to interact with them whatsoever because I have this smart key system, so I can, you know, wait until there's no one in the stairs, and then I can sneak down and do my thing. And if I bump into someone, I don't need to say hello because I can still wash my clothes, which is a great way of doing things. But I think this is a great analogy for how Swedish society works, so that my building is like a small scale model of society. This doesn't mean that I hate my neighbors, and I hope they don't hate me. I have quite a good relationship with my neighbor. We talk to each other once in a while, but they will never interfere with me washing my clothes. And even if I hated them, or even if they hated me, or even if, you know, we didn't talk to each other whatsoever, that would never interfere with my practical things. It would never interfere with my washing. And at the same time, this is such a clear system, you know, either your key, your lock is there or not, that we will never have to go into some sort of discussion. Is it your turn or mine, or shouldn't you be done soon because it's my turn? We have a question.
Yeah, well, regarding this booking system, so how does it come that the most or the largest conflicts that you have with your other tenants in the building is related to the booking system? So how it benefits that you don't have any relation to your neighbors, and related to this booking system, that if you don't have any sort of communication with them, that so how do you still come to that phase that you have this conflict?
I think one part.
How does it benefit?
Yeah, I think one part. I don't think we have as many conflicts as we seem to be, but it's a bit of a joke, you know, because if there is a conflict, you write these really passive-aggressive notes, and that's an art in Sweden. You know, if I write a good one, I'm going to show it on social media and show everyone how clever I am. So I think we are exaggerating those conflicts a bit, but
they are in the news.
Huh?
They are in the newspapers, like the most common conflicts with other.
Yeah, but I mean those are self-reported, so I still think there is a bit of fun there in talking about it. But to get to your question, yes, I think it's a really interesting thing what happens when there is a conflict, because I think what happens is when you have that kind of practical thing and you have that emotional thing with relationships, and when these two spheres are colliding, there will be a lot of conflict. We're not willing to mix those two spheres, and we're gonna, you know, stick to those routines, and if someone doesn't, that really upsets many Swedish people. And I'm gonna sort of use this as an analogy for work. I think somehow the washing system, that's our professional life, and our personal relationship with our neighbors, that's our personal lives. And again, when those two things collide, there will be a lot of friction. So it is definitely a very sort of interesting topic. So I think the way we're sort of imagining our lives is you have this individual, and on one side you have the private part, where you have your emotional relationships, where you do love people, and where you do talk to people, and when you have relationships to people. And then you have a public sphere, where anything practical goes, going to work, paying for anything, washing your clothes, and then you have that dashed line there, that's our conflict zone, that's where things are collided. And I think the concept of privacy is very interesting. When I tell my clients that, you know, privacy is a very important thing in Swedish culture, they object. Partly because windows have no curtains, partly because people shout their personal numbers at the supermarket to get their loyalty points, and partly because everything can be found online. This is me. You can see that I'm just going into my middle-age crisis, that my French husband exists, and where I live. If you pay an additional 49 crowns, you can find out how much or how little money I make. And I think in most places in the world, this is considered very private information. This is not something that you would share publicly on the internet. But from a Swedish perspective, this makes perfect sense, because if you would like to congratulate me on my birthday, you don't actually need to ask me when my birthday is. You can look it up online, and you can even, you know, on the same page, you will have a little service where you can send me flowers without actually talking to me first. Yes?
I'm curious about your opinion. This goes totally against the GDPR. And I was in contact with all the websites I found my name on, saying, please take me off. You are going against the regulation. I'm still there. And yeah, so what is your opinion on how, because this is total insane thing that Sweden has.
No, I'm very scared of that question. It comes every time, and then someone is very angry with me, because my answer is like, on a personal level, you know, I grew up with this. I'm completely brainwashed. I think it makes perfect sense, and I think I'm quite representative of most people who've lived the majority of their lives here. Objectively speaking, you know, as you're saying, GDPR, you know, I do understand your point, and I think, you know, I think it makes sense. But, you know, if you're asking me as a person, no. I don't really care, you know, and I think why I'm telling you this is that I think you should be aware that this is the general opinion by most people. You wanted to?
You misunderstand me. I've used it quite well to investigate some other people. I'm not exactly. So that's probably Swedes don't do that, but it's just an example that, you know, this can be used.
Yeah, definitely. I don't want to guess too much or speculate too far, but I'm thinking this is a system that will disappear in the future. There will be a wake-up moment when, like, what have we been doing the last 100 years?
It's actually surprising that this hasn't gone wrong yet. So I'm flabbergasted, to be honest, because I would envision a lot of tragedies. And they haven't happened, so I guess to some miracle it just works.
It's a good topic for a research project, I think, and how does it actually function, and why is it not more abused than it is?
Actually, there were criminal cases a couple of years ago, and people selling fake things, like expensive watches, when they were finding people of particular age, elderly people who could be easily tricked, and then going into their home and knocking at the door and saying,
This happens everywhere. Like, you have these, you know, phone scammers, Nigerian princes, and all that.
This is not considered private, according to most Swedish people. But what is considered private is this long list of things that make us feel vulnerable in a social context. One thing that makes us feel very, very awkward and that we would like to keep private is our differences, personal differences between us as individuals. And in any sort of public setting, when we're, for example, at work, this is something we're trying to hide or not to mention, because this is something that we would like to protect much more than our address, birthday, and income. Another thing that is possibly some sort of aspect of differences is disagreement. If we're not agreeing on a topic, this is not something I would speak publicly about. This is something I will keep to myself, because again, that would highlight how different we are. That includes any sort of opinions or feelings. And one feeling that I'll come back to is embarrassment. That's something that we don't want to show or display or see in public. I often get these questions, do Swedish people have feelings? Yes, we do. I cry a lot, for example, and I laugh a lot, but I do this with my family at home at Lotterivägen 47, Hägersten, second floor. And another interesting thing is like things like, again, something that makes us different is like our symptoms of old age, our symptoms of disability, pain and disease. This is something that we don't want to speak about in public. And I get this question very often. You get onto a bus or something, or the tunnelbana, and you see this very sort of old, frail person standing in the corner, and then on every seat there is this very sturdy, middle-aged person just looking at their phone and not offering their seat to that old person. And what horrible people Swedish people are, because they're not, helping them. And in fact, we might look like we're looking on our phones, but we're both stressing and like, should I ask or should I not? Because I might offend this elderly lady by suggesting to her in public that she's not as strong as me. So it is actually something that we're really worried about, that we might offend someone by suggesting that we're not equals, but that you might need my seat more than you do. So we are tormented by this. In the workplace, we don't speak very openly about hierarchical relationships, but we want to pretend that everyone has equal opportunities. And a very important question is the matter of truth. That could be very hurtful, because again, it might highlight our differences. So this is a list of things that we do consider very private. We do consider it something that should never be brought up in any sort of public context, such as work. Neda?
I am confused.
Yes?
Does it mean that at work you don't tell the truth, you don't tell your opinions?
No.
Only if you agree.
Are you surprised?
No, I actually, I told my story at work that I was doing a kind of research on the pains and challenges of certain area, and I was discussing personally with a lot of employees, and everyone told me this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. So I made kind of a generic picture of what are the root causes, and I made a presentation. I was almost slashed for that, because that's not what you do. You don't tell the truth. You don't tell the negative things.
I mean, it's not that we're telling lies all the time, but if the truth...
It's not a good one.
If the truth is in conflict with the concept of harmony, yes, we will choose harmony. We will choose that idea that everyone in the group is sort of content with each other, and then, we're going to sacrifice the truth if the truth hurts or bring up feelings. Yes?
I mean, there is some kind of limit how far you can go, You can't have a harmony all the time, and at one point it breaks. So, and you will have a larger conflict because you haven't discussed your differences and other things. So for me it's really hard to understand. I have lived in Sweden for 20 years now, and I understand completely what you're saying, but to be honest, it's so hard to adapt because you always have to play some kind of role. I usually say that you have to have this kind of poker face, you can't be yourself. And to be honest, it's really depressing. Mental, it's depressing, and I mean, at the end you can get insane because you can't express your feelings or what you think about the, So I really don't understand how you manage. Really.
Totally agree.
And I mean, you said that you express yourself. I mean, when you're at home with your family, but at the same time, you don't have any family connection really because you're afraid of conflicts and say what you really feel. So I'm quite. I really would like to understand. Some point I understand, but I really would like to be, feel one day how you really are. Or so it's a real mystery for me.
I wish I had a good sort of answer to your despair here, and I think sometimes, I speak to my husband a lot.
Yeah.
Very openly, and he's French, so he can sometimes be a little bit too open to me. But he tells me about his Swedish colleagues and how and I tell him no, it's fine. But then I'm realizing I don't actually meet any Swedish people at work, so I'm sort of protected from this. Obviously, you will have different workplaces. If you're lucky enough, you're in a more sort of diverse place. I think young people are probably sort of prone to be a little bit more open about their feelings, about their, about truth. But traditionally, I think this is a model that many Swedish people will apply, and especially in contexts when they're not feeling very secure. So say if they're new to a workplace or they're new in a group, or this is the etiquette they're following until they feel a little bit more comfortable with their colleagues. I'm really not encouraging you to become like us. I'm very grateful for you bringing in some truth and opinions and disagreement, So this is not the purpose of me being here. I just want to sort of explain to you this is how we're reasoning. Please change this. We need you guys. So it's good you're reacting. We have another question here.
Just the public objective side, I would like to hear a little bit more about that, because I understand that this public objective, this is like our business part, where we are outside and we are acting with our colleagues. So this equal accessibility for all, what is this?
No, I think this is like a little bit like that story of the bus. We're pretending that everyone here has the same opportunity, and in a workplace, for example, we're not going to speak openly about someone not being able to say perform a certain task. It will be sort of communicated indirectly because it is. We don't want to mention in a public setting that we're not equals, that you have more money than me, or you are smarter than me, or you have a higher education than me. That's something that makes us feel a bit ashamed. So we're sort of pretending that everyone is an equal. May I continue? Yes. And this logic will impact our communication style. So when I'm at home and I am with my friends and I can, feel that I'm secure in a very private setting, I can speak explicitly about all these things, like the differences, the disagreements, my opinions, truth. But in a public setting, I will start adapting my communication style according to whether we're dealing with the private sphere or the public sphere. So in a public setting, I can speak very explicitly about, the objective things, about our similarities, about things that we are agreeing on, about facts, that's fine. And that's when you'll see Swedish people being very sort of short and abrupt in their conversation. I'll send you my report and I get okay, as instead of thank you very much for completing it on time or something, that you might expect. Because we believe that these things, everyone is on par, we are on the same level, we don't need to have a lot of extra fluff when we're talking about it. But when we get into the sort of subjective sides that are, private things, we will use a very implicit communication style to sort of get around these things. And that means that if we're going to talk about differences or something that we're disagreeing on, we will not say that directly, but we will use these very different, fluffy phrases and sandwich our criticism between two positive things. For example, you use different sort of expressions to not touch on the subject. And Neda told this story that she was very explicit about, something that was not functioning in a group. And I think, if you would have that very stereotypical Swede, they would bake it in a big ball of fluff, saying many positive things, to get one little core in the middle where you're suggesting that something may not be, the way it should be. And I think, again, don't do it like us, you should really speak to us explicitly about these things. But what may be, an issue is that you might have difficulty understanding what someone is telling you. You might get some feedback at work which may sound like, this is a great report, I really enjoyed reading it, maybe it was a tiny bit too long, but thanks so much for completing it on time, which is Swedish for, it was far too long, make it shorter. So it might be good to be aware of that tendency, when you're listening to something, because in that sort of big statement there will be this little grain of disagreement or truth that you should, you're supposed to, act on or react to. I'm writing a book at the moment for it's a textbook for it's a professional Swedish for engineers, and I was interviewing a historian who wrote about a book about engineering in Sweden. And by the end of this book, there's an anecdote. He talks about his son, who's an engineer, and his son goes to work as an engineer, a software engineer in India. And his son, who's a very typical young Swedish confident man, he has a great idea. And he's thinking about his idea, he's walking in the corridor, and then he bumps into the CEO. So he stops this guy and goes, well, I have this idea, let's do something about it. And this Indian CEO is looking at him like, well, you should talk to your supervisor, and your supervisor will talk to their supervisor, and their supervisor will, talk to theirs, and that person will possibly speak to me. Anyway, this historian who's writing this, he's going, I'm so happy about this, because I think this is that's a great thing that makes Sweden compete on the global engineering market. That we will have many ideas being lifted and listened to in Swedish company. That's something really positive about Sweden. But when I was making this interview with him, I was bringing up this anecdote, and I thought, well, do you have any advice to the international engineers, based on that story? And he told me, well, when I wrote that story, I wrote 2 parts, but the publisher only published the first part. And the second part is that in Sweden, this is very much encouraged. Go and tell your CEO or whoever you bump into the corridor about your great idea. But if it's a great idea, the CEO will listen and they will, actually do something about it. But if the idea is not very good, they will not tell you it's not very good. They will tell you, yeah, sure, interesting. And then nothing will happen. And he was telling me this historian, he used to work in a company, and there was a Russian woman in that case, she would come to him and she would tell him things, and he would go, yeah, sure. And then she assumed that he hadn't listened, so she would come back to him and tell him the same thing, and he would be like, yeah. And then, after the nth time, she had reminded him of this idea, he realized that she didn't understand that he was saying, no, that's a bad idea. Which is in Swedish, yeah, sure. So it's a lot about trying to listen and understand what is that hidden message. So this will impact us in a group, when we're in a public setting, when we're going to work, we are one individual with lots of feelings, lots of opinions, we know a lot about the truth, and we still have to sort of function as part of the group. What do Swedish people do? Well, Swedish people are, I think you used poker face, but I used the happy face. That's our idea of functioning in a group. We're trying to be similar. We're trying to be quite happy, non-confrontational, not very deep. That's a very superficial idea of a person. And we might think, that we're doing it because we're bad people or boring or something, but what we're trying to do with this little happy face is that we're trying to protect each other. We're trying to protect each other's privacy. We're trying to give each other the opportunity to be whoever they want to be, because they will never have to tell us who they are. They will never have to show who they are, meaning they're protected to be really big, have really strong opinions, lots of feelings, but packaged in that happy face so that they will never have to be exposed in a public setting. So this is our idea of a happy, harmonious workplace. And that means this will have impact on how you make a good impression. And I know this is a lot what I work with it. I work a lot as a consultant for Swedish companies who are welcoming employees from other cultures, and they're a bit shocked sometimes because they don't understand their behavior. And my sort of standing point here is that everyone going into a new workplace is trying to make a good impression. You will never meet a person who goes into a new workplace not trying to make a good impression. This is what we all do wherever we're coming from. But dependent on our backgrounds, we're trying to make that good impression in different ways. And in a sort of Swedish company, or according to Swedish culture, what we're trying to do, being that happy poker face, we're also trying, to be recognizing everyone as another happy poker face. We're not trying to show more respect to our superiors or something, because everyone is supposed to be the same. An important thing when I'm talking to the Southern Europeans is that we're very keen on being pragmatic and not theorizing. This is a huge problem for my French husband, who always had a long theory or something that the philosopher said 300 years ago to back up his statements. That doesn't work so well with Swedish people. But I think one very important part that I think may apply to you, because my prejudice say that you're all very hardworking people and that you're trying to make a good impression by showing your colleagues and your superiors that you're taking your work very seriously and that you're working very hard, you're putting in extra hours, you're delivering something that is excellent. Well, that's sorry, but that's not on our list. For example, we believe that it's much more important to deliver according to plan than to deliver something really good. I mean, ideally, deliver something that's really good according to plan, but if you're delivering excellence but not according to the plan, you will really not get that recognition you deserve. The same with working many hours, you will get that that person can't plan their time. It is not giving a good impression. You just seem to be very bad at planning. So if this is the way you're trying to impress, you should maybe just try to enjoy a little bit more, take some more time off, because it's not worth the effort. And, special point to Neda here, trying to bring up those really important things that will help your company develop and go the right direction will not always be appreciated, because you are sort of shaking that harmony and the environment that we're trying, that bubble we're trying to create. Sorry, this was my second point here, but another thing that I think applies to you guys as well is that idea. I think when you go into work, when you go into workplace, we all have to pretend something, and I think in many cultures, you go into work and you pretend that work is really important. So you're very serious about your work. You want to show your colleagues, your superiors, how dedicated you are to this very significant project. But in Sweden, we're not pretending it's important. We are pretending it's fun. That's why we go to work, because it's so much fun. And that's going back to my first point about that idea of, self-expression. You remember, we chose our careers not because we wanted to make money or that we wanted to have, a secure life. We chose our careers because they're fun. And, I'm 40 years old, and I think 41 actually, if you read it carefully. We will come to that point, in life when we somehow regret our career choices, We all took maybe bad decisions when you were, 20 or however old you were when you were going into that career path. But, we can't tell ourselves that we went that wrong way, not listening to our same parents or anything, we can't face that truth that we took the wrong decision. So we're gonna maintain and pretend until we retire that the reason we get up in the morning is because it's so much fun to work. And this can be a culture shock as well, because you might go into a meeting or you're meeting a new business partner and you want to show them how important this is to you and how serious you are. And you get the Swedish people going, oh, it's so exciting starting this new project, or it's so much fun. We don't really believe that, but it's that sort of effort to keep that collective lie that this is the purpose of us being here. And a shortcut to this is if you look at your LinkedIn profile, every Swedish person will smile, and that's a really important thing to show that, happiness that you're associating with work. And yes?
So that explains, because we're having so much fun at work, people at work don't really become friends in Sweden. So when I moved to Sweden, my Swedish husband told me, all your friendships will be outside the work environment. That's why we go to one club, to the other club. That's where friendships come from. Work is just for work. We don't make friends at work.
You don't make friends at work. And
that explains.
Yeah, and I think it's also, if you make friends at work, they might get to know you. And they might get to know what...
They might invite you home.
Yeah, and you might get to know their opinions, and that might harm your professional relationship, and you will not have a very smooth, happy poker face group anymore, because you're starting to come out of your shell and show that you're this ugly dinosaur or whatever you are. So but it does happen.
But then can I ask your personal opinion, what the hell are afterworks then?
I think after work is because we don't meet outside, we don't make friends, but we still have that need, to connect to each other and sort of, get to know a little bit about one another and, strengthen that sort of professional relationship we have, talking about quite neutral things, but still going a bit personal but not private. And I think the whole thing about fika is the same, we need those little rituals where we actually face each other and have some sort of conversation, even if you can't come to my house and get to know my political opinions or whatever I care a lot about.
So it's like mini team buildings every time we meet outside the work.
Sorry?
It's like kind of team buildings in a minimal form.
Yeah. We have another question.
How would you recommend to take an initiative? Usually initiatives are about the change or something where there's a problem. Like how can we be better at actually taking initiative?
Yes, that's a very good. I wonder if I didn't make a point about that. Yes, this is a really interesting point about that idea of being obedient and doing what you're told, or taking initiatives. And I've been working a bit with Swedish workplaces receiving people on internships, and the most common type of feedback we get from the Swedish employers is that these interns are not taking enough initiatives, and this is often the reason as well why they're not offering employment. And very often professionals who come from more sort of hierarchical cultures, they don't really feel, what are they supposed to do? What can they do? And they often tend to await like some sort of response or instructions from their superiors. Whereas from a Swedish perspective, that gives that kind of impression of being very passive, and that you're not actually, taking action, seeing what needs to be done. I've received your question before, and I still don't really have a very good shortcut answer, because, as you're saying, this is also in conflict and being, visible and being seen and being different from each other. I think this is related to that Swedish teenagers often have summer jobs, and Swedish children often start working from the age of 13. At weekends, evenings, weekends, and summers. So when we graduate from university, we often have at least 10 years work experience, often in sort of unqualified jobs, of course. But I've been selling hot dogs. I've done many things, but one job I had, I was at Kungsholmen, and I was in one of these little kiosks selling hot dogs, and I was all on my own for a summer in this kiosk selling hot dogs. And many things happen when you sell hot dogs. You drop hot dogs on the floor, there are weird customers, etc. You really need to sort things out. And I think this is what happens to many Swedish people. They come into a more qualified sort of profession in their late 20s, early 30s, but they have a lot of practical work experience, and we're really trained to see what needs to be done in a very sort of practical way. And I think in many cultures, I have absolutely no idea about yours on this topic. It's you're serious and you're a good student if you don't work parallel to your studies. So when you come, when you graduate from university, you rarely have any work experience at all, and you're very sort of theoretical. And I think if you compare that, a Swedish 28-year-old and say a French 28-year-old. You will act very differently in a work environment, because that hot dog experience kind of gives you a certain sort of confidence. But I think it's a good thing to be aware of that, can you see something around you that needs to be done, that this is usually done by someone, well, why shouldn't you do it? Do it. Never sit down and wait. And if you're experiencing that you don't have enough to do, really have a chat with your colleagues or your boss, because there is that risk that you might be perceived as a little bit too sort of passive and not, Neda?
There is some contradiction between initiative and delivering according to the plan. And I experienced that myself, that I showed initiative to organize the hackathon. I worked with innovations, and of course I got too much involved, even though it was a teamwork, but we delivered on excellence, so supposed to. And that excellence, of course, costed more our time, and I afterwards got the kind of negative feedback saying that I overused the resources, so I went out of scope. That was like beyond the plan, and that was a bad thing, even though it was huge success and everything. So it was like this contradiction between those, and I felt it very much.
I think this is a really good point. I think working more than what you're supposed to might get your employer in trouble, because they're responsible for your work environment. They're really terrified of this. Also, delivering excellence is setting the bar for your colleagues. If you're doing it at this level, they will have to do it at this level. Are they ready to do that? Maybe not. So you are really kind of pushing things here, that you are expecting things from others. You're expecting them to deliver at the same level as you. You're expecting your employer to sort of adhere to the work regulations, for example, and the kollektivavtal, the collective agreement, may have regulations about how many hours you're supposed to put in, how many hours they're supposed to reimburse you, etc. So it is there are so many regulations here that you will have to take into account when you want to do something extra, and the regulations will go first. But I think a good thing, if you want to take initiative, is there anything that's not going to the plan within this organization? Well, if you can take initiative to fix that so that it's going according to the plan, you're scoring double points. But I think, organizing such things, you really have to have a lot of support from the start. Again, I don't want to tell you what to do, but I'm telling you how people may react. So how do you approach this poker face, the egghead, or whatever you want to call them? You might feel that this person is very difficult to get to know. They might seem a bit boring, a bit superficial. They're not talking about their interests or opinions or feelings, and you might even find it difficult to differentiate between different people in the organization because they all seem the same. Well, I know my husband. He's great. One of the best things about him is he inspires me a lot for my work. What he's doing when he's trying to approach a Swedish person, he's trying to crack that shell. He's trying to, I watched the party leader debate last night. What did you think about it? Trying to go straight in and see how they're going to react to that. Or he's starting conflicts just for the fun of it. I think that so he's really going forward, towards them. But the problem here is that the Swedish people will back off. So I think he should be a source of inspiration for us, because I think if you do the opposite, if you back off a little bit and you play according to the rules, if you start discussing, what did you do this weekend? Do you have any renovation projects going on? How is your cat? A Swedish person will feel quite safe. They know that you're playing according to the same rules, and with that safety they will soon start opening up a little bit, and you will get to know a little bit more about their lives and their opinions and their feelings, and you might even make friends. I've made some very amateur studies on this. I think and I concluded it takes 2 years to go from not knowing someone and then approaching them gently to actually having some sort of personal relationship. It works. But then the question is, should I do that? Really? Should I become one of them? So do you want to be one of these boring Swedish poker faces? Because you are stars. You are a bunch of stars here, right? You're great. You're really good at doing your job. I know you're very well educated. You're very professional. You're not afraid of bringing up the truth. You're not, afraid of making this organization a really good one. I know you're really good at your job. The problem with stars is, those points can be quite sharp, especially amongst Swedes. And I think you might think, I need to sort of cut them off and become one of these round balls, not hurting anyone, and you'll fit in. But the answer is no, this is not what you're gonna do. You are a star, keep that star, but you might need to put a little bit of padding, between those points. Be yourself, but use your knowledge of Swedes, and sort of, you can use that when you need it. And then when you don't need it, you're your sharp star, you do the right thing, you make things, you deliver excellence, and then you put a little bit of padding in when you need it. And I think this is what Sweden needs, We need you, but just be a little bit gentle with us. I know, I've been with my husband for almost 10 years, but he can still make me cry by telling me things like, you forgot to put your tea bag in the bin. Because this is the harshest criticism I have received in my whole life, the way he says it. So we are quite sensitive to proper criticism, so be gentle with us. We're very grateful we're here.
At least he doesn't write you a post-it note about the tea bag. No, but...
yeah, exactly, sorry.
But my sort of informal observations is that I think, and we know we're generalizing here, I think Swedes are sometimes also tired of their own culture. So when I observe Swedes abroad, they are totally different people.
Yes.
They open up far too much. I don't need to know so much information. They just go bananas. And then they go back. So they sort of go into Greece just to, for psychotherapy session to be able to talk, and then they come back. And every year when I observe it, I think, well, why don't you just become more sensible back at home?
I think it's a very good point. Yeah, that's what we do. We get a break, and yeah, we're not surrounded by those, faces. We can do whatever we want. But I think this is. I know Sweden is changing. It's like 20% of people living in Sweden are born in a different country. There are changes. We will become more normal, confident. It'll just take a little bit of time, and be gentle with us in the meantime. But I'm just comparing with my own, background, and when I grew up in Sweden, things have changed a lot. It is much. When I grew up, we were not allowed to talk as we were eating. We'd sit down at the table, it was lunch or dinner or whatever, and if someone said something, it was låt maten tysta mun, let your food silence your mouth. That was a proverb, and that was applicable in all sorts of situations, and it's 30, 40 years later, and we're quite continental. We have conversations when we eat, although they're quite boring, but we're learning, we're becoming a little bit more sane. This is my last slide.
Can I just ask, so for us to be comfortable, so what are these topics we can talk which are personal but not private? So pets, cats, dogs, yeah?
I think anything that can be measured, like anything that you can say, 69 or 32, 4, that works really well, because it's always objective, We're not going to discuss whether your cat is 4 years old or 5 years old, So if your cat is 4 years old and mine is 6, mine is 2 years older than yours. So Swedish people, a very common thing is like, how big is your flat? My flat is 70 square meters, although when I bought it in the ad, it was 69. That's a topic to discuss. Swedish people love working out. How far do you run? How long does it take you? What's the weight of, when you do the weightlifting? How far away is your sommarstuga? These are always safe topics. The temperature, but otherwise the weather, the weekend, the holiday plans, what you did last holiday, renovation projects, pets, plants, recipes. Very common, if you sit down to have your lunchbox, everyone will eat, and then you ask, what is that? And then they will tell you, and then you can ask, how do you make that? And then you make something similar.
But you see, that's very difficult. In Lithuania, if you start saying, how big is your summer house, that's competitive. Because then we'll start comparing, how big is your apartment compared to mine? So you're saying we need to ask these questions to make Swedes comfortable, whereas we will feel totally uncomfortable with these questions.
Well, find something that you find, the weather is a good topic. It will not make, you might feel a bit bored, but, and a good one is like, because of the weather, I will do this. It's looking like it's gonna rain this weekend, so I'm gonna watch this TV series. Have you watched this TV series? Yes, and I watch this other TV series too. That's a half an hour conversation there. Yes?
I just have one, actually I have two questions. So one is related to the differences and, opposing. And then, I came here, I came 5 months ago, so not that long time ago. But it was the first, impression when I joined the organization was that people are not afraid to speak up and to say their opinions. And for me it was a bit, surprising, because I am coming from, the Lithuanian company where we had this hierarchical approach. And even if you are employee, you oppose to the manager in your organization here in Sweden. And in terms of, what you now told, and, you don't, disagree openly or to that, open extent, how then in my organization could be that this happens? Is there some kind of organizational maturity, or is it that, now this organization is now accepted as a family? Or what could be, the possible reasons?
I think there are two answers.
Ownership of the company. You're working for a German company. So that is a big difference.
I think part of the answer is you're very lucky to be in a company, and as I said in the beginning, I have been generalizing. This definitely not apply. It doesn't apply to all individuals, all organizations, for sure, which is very lucky. I think the second thing is, everyone can say their opinion, but what you may not hear is like other people opposing to it. So you might hear a lot of people expressing their opinions, but they don't get any sort of no, they just get which is no in Swedish. So you might not yet forgive me for saying you're not that competent yet, but you might not see everything yet, not knowing everything. I mean, as I said, you might say something, but the reply might be a bit sort of hidden. Yes, Neda?
I just wanted to answer, Amanda, it very much depends who are the owners and where is the main capital that also defines the culture and how, the hierarchy and feedback and everything. So that's one thing, but also depends how much international, or could be Swedish, but if it is very international markets, or if employees are traveling a lot, then they have different mindsets. So
And international teams as well.
yeah.
And the age as well, and I mean there are definitely many factors, definitely.
And I had the second question was about, in terms of the work is fun idea, how much Swedes are willing to change their choices, their career choices?
It is actually very common that Swedish people change their career choices later in life, and going to university, for example, you don't have to pay for it, so it's relatively easy. It is considered quite positive even on the job market to sort of, and many Swedish employers are very happy to employ someone who's changed their career completely. And if you look at these professional magazines, I have a few of them at home, there's very often an article, this banker became gardener, or this IT consultant became a paramedic, and it's really celebrated because it shows that they take that fun very seriously. And I think another thing is we don't identify so much with our work. That might sound a bit contradictory as well. So if you are a banker turning a gardener, you don't lose a lot of status in that sense. It's, as a gardener, you might not get paid as much as a banker, but it's rather seen as like, wow, that person, they really care about their interest, and that's something you'd admire. So both on the sort of, in terms of status and in terms of the possibility of doing it's very easy and very common, and I think it's even a positive thing to have these transferable skills and stuff. It was a huge thing a few years ago to go from the military to work as a principal in a school. Many Swedish school principals came from the military. That was seen as very good transferable skills there. I think there are big generational differences, and I don't think we can just sort of categorize into young and old, but there are maybe 4 different sort of cohorts in the work market right now that react very differently to different situations, and I sometimes feel that I'm not actually keeping up with youngest people and how they are seeing work culture and how they are handling certain situations. So I think I'm going to send myself on sort of internships to observe the 20s in the workplace. We have another question.
So does it help to learn Swedish and also write?
Yes, it really will help you to learn Swedish. I think Swedish people overestimate their English language skills hugely. And I think that might... we speak English in a way that makes it sound quite fluent, and that deceives a lot of people because you think that is a native speaker or almost native speaker, but then the way we're treating the language and using the language is quite far from a native speaker. So you are sort of, if someone comes with a very heavy accent, you're going to forgive that person for being very blunt or abrupt or saying weird things, Whereas if I'm saying some weird thing now, you're just going to think that I'm weird. So I think by learning Swedish, you will understand much more about not only how we communicate in Swedish, but how we communicate in English. And I think you will connect faster and deeper to people as well. Because I think many Swedish people, even if they speak English at work and they feel confident to speak about their projects, they are not used to having social relationships in English, and there is a reluctance there as well, maybe not conscious, but to start and initiate a relationship where you have to express yourself in another language. So it will definitely be easier to approach people if you speak the language. No more questions, but I have a gift. I have a publishing house. I'm very excited. It's called Lys Förlag. I can offer you a discount if you buy any of my books. They're written by me and other people. I can recommend my own book. It's called Working in Sweden. It's giving you all sorts of advice. We also have a book that we produced together with the English newspaper The Local, introducing you to more fun things, Swedish words. So have a look. There's a discount code. It's called Baltic 15. It gives you 15% off until next week. Thank you so much for laughing at my jokes.
Thank you.